long before electric lights filled Japan's cities, before trains crossed the countryside, and before great castles rose above busy towns, there were only forests, mountains, rivers, and small villages resting quietly between them. The lives of ordinary people moved gently with the seasons. Spring brought fresh rice shoots. Summer filled valleys with the songs of cicadas. Autumn painted the mountains in brilliant shades of crimson and gold. Then winter settled softly across the land. Snow-covered rooftops. Smoke drifted peacefully from wooden homes. Families gathered around warm hearths as the evenings grew long. It was during evenings like these, when work had finally ended and the fire burned low, that many of Japan's oldest folktales were shared. Not by scholars, nor by priests, but by grandparents, parents, neighbors. Stories passed from one voice to another, sometimes changing ever so slightly, sometimes remaining almost exactly the same for hundreds of years. Among all of these treasured tales, perhaps none has captured the imagination of Japan quite like the story of the bamboo cutter. It is known by many names. Some call it the tale of Princess Kaguya. Others simply remember it as the bamboo cutter's story. Scholars often consider it one of the oldest surviving works of Japanese literature. Its written form dates back more than 1,000 years, yet many believe the story itself is even older, passed quietly from generation to generation long before anyone placed brush upon paper. There's something wonderfully timeless about the tale. It speaks of beauty, wonder, love, and the quiet sadness that sometimes accompanies beautiful things. For some of the loveliest moments in life remain with us only briefly. Imagine a peaceful valley surrounded by low mountains. Morning mist still clings to the fields. The first rays of sunlight slowly reach the tops of ancient cedar trees. Nearby, a bamboo forest rises toward the sky. Thousands upon thousands of slender green stalks sway gently together. Whenever the wind passes through them, they whisper, not loudly, never urgently, only a soft rustling like distant rain falling across countless leaves. Walking through such a forest feels strangely calming. Sunlight filters between the tall bamboo in long golden beams. The ground below remains cool even during warm afternoons. Bird song echoes gently overhead. Every movement of the wind creates quiet music. Even today, Japan is home to beautiful bamboo groves. Perhaps the most famous stands in Urashima near Kyoto. Visitors from around the world walk beneath its towering stalks. Many describe feeling the same peaceful stillness imagined within this ancient tale. It was beside a forest much like this that an elderly bamboo cutter lived with his wife. The old stories never described them as wealthy. Their home was small, their clothing simple, their lives ordinary. Each morning before sunrise, the bamboo cutter entered the forest carrying only a small axe and a woven basket. He selected mature bamboo carefully, never taking more than needed. For generations, bamboo had provided nearly everything a household required: baskets, water containers, fences, flutes, walking sticks, fishing tools, even children's toys. It was a plant woven quietly into everyday life. The old bamboo cutter respected the forest deeply. He never hurried his work. Each cut was careful, each step unhurried. Perhaps after many years he had learned that forests reward patience. One cool morning, as sunlight slowly reached deeper into the grove, something unusual caught his eye. Among countless green stalks, one shone. Not brightly, not suddenly. Its light was gentle, warm, almost like the glow of a lantern seen through morning mist. The old man stopped walking. For several quiet moments he simply watched. The glowing bamboo stood perfectly still among its neighbors. The wind moved every other stalk, yet this one seemed almost untouched. Curiosity led him closer. As he approached, the soft light became clearer. It seemed to come from inside the bamboo itself. The old cutter placed one weathered hand upon the smooth green surface. It felt warm, not hot, only pleasantly warm, as though touched by the first light of dawn. Very carefully he raised his axe. One gentle strike, then another. The bamboo opened. Inside, resting upon the soft inner fibers, was a tiny child, no larger than the palm of his hand. She glowed with the same gentle radiance that had first drawn his attention. Her tiny robes shimmered softly. Her face remained peaceful. She was not crying, not frightened. She simply looked quietly up at the old man. The bamboo cutter lowered himself slowly onto one knee. He had spent countless mornings in these forests. Never, not once, had he imagined finding such a thing. The child smiled, only slightly, yet somehow the entire grove seemed brighter. The whispering bamboo continued swaying overhead. Birds still sang among the branches. The world itself had not changed. Yet for the old bamboo cutter everything suddenly felt different. He gently lifted the tiny child into his hands. She was astonishingly light, almost as though she carried no weight at all. Holding her carefully, he made his way home through the quiet forest. Each step felt slower than usual, not because the journey had become difficult, but because wonder naturally slows our pace. When he reached the small wooden house, his wife looked up in surprise. Without saying a word, he opened his hands. There, resting peacefully within them, was the tiny glowing child. The old woman smiled immediately. There was no fear, no hesitation, only warmth. For many years the couple had wished for a child, yet none had ever come. Now, quite unexpectedly, the bamboo forest itself had offered them one. They welcomed the little girl into their home, not questioning where she had come from, not wondering whether such things should be possible. Sometimes folktales ask us to accept wonder simply because wonder has arrived. The child grew, but not as ordinary children do. Within only a few months she became as large as any young girl. Her glowing light slowly softened, though people often remarked that something about her remained extraordinary. She possessed remarkable grace, quiet kindness, and a beauty unlike anything anyone in the valley had ever seen. The old couple named her Kaguya, or more completely Princess Kaguya, though at the time they knew nothing of princesses. To them she was simply the daughter they had always hoped for. As the seasons quietly passed, something else began happening. Whenever the old bamboo cutter entered the forest, he discovered pieces of gold hidden inside the bamboo stalks. Not every stalk, only those the forest seemed willing to offer. Little by little the couple's humble life changed. Their roof became stronger, their clothing warmer, food became plentiful, yet they remained gentle people, never seeking luxury, never forgetting the quiet forest that had blessed them. Sometimes old folktales remind us that true wealth arrives gently, not to encourage greed but to reward gratitude. As Princess Kaguya continued growing, news of her beauty slowly spread beyond the valley. Travelers carried stories from village to village. Merchants spoke of the mysterious young woman raised by the bamboo cutter. Even noble families in distant provinces began hearing whispers. Some claimed no flower could compare with her beauty. Others said her voice resembled the sound of flowing water. Still others believed that simply seeing her smile brought peace to the heart. Whether these stories were entirely true, no one could say. Stories have always grown slightly larger each time they are retold. Yet one thing became certain. The quiet life of the bamboo cutter's family would not remain quiet forever. For beyond the peaceful bamboo forest, visitors had already begun their journey. Drawn by rumor's curiosity and the hope of meeting the mysterious young woman whose beauty seemed almost beyond the ordinary world. As the years quietly passed, Princess Kaguya became known far beyond the small valley where she had been raised. Travelers carried stories from one province to another. Merchants repeated them while resting beside roadside inns. Pilgrims shared them during long walks between temples. Little by little, the tale of the bamboo cutter's daughter spread throughout the land. Some claimed she was the most beautiful woman in Japan. Others believed such beauty could not belong to an ordinary person. The old bamboo cutter listened to these stories with quiet humility. To him she was still simply the child he had discovered within a glowing stalk of bamboo. She still helped prepare simple meals. She still walked peacefully through the garden beside their home. She still paused to admire wildflowers blooming after spring rain. Nothing about her daily life seemed grand, yet the world beyond their valley imagined someone almost magical. Soon visitors began arriving, at first only a few. Young men from neighboring villages, curious travelers, sons of local landowners. They politely asked whether they might meet Princess Kaguya. The old bamboo cutter welcomed each guest with kindness. He was prepared. Quiet conversations followed, yet Kaguya rarely appeared. She preferred the peaceful company of forests to the excitement of strangers. As months passed, the visitors changed. No longer were they ordinary travelers. Now powerful noblemen journeyed across the country. Some belonged to ancient families serving the imperial court. Others possessed great estates. Some had spent years studying poetry. Others had earned fame through learning or military service. Each believed they possessed something worthy of admiration. Yet all arrived with the same hope, to ask Princess Kaguya to become their wife. The old bamboo cutter found himself in a difficult position. Part of him wished for his daughter to find happiness. Another part quietly feared losing the peaceful life they had always shared. Kaguya understood his concerns. One evening, as the summer wind whispered gently through the bamboo outside, she spoke softly. She explained that she had no desire to choose a husband simply because someone admired her appearance. Instead, if anyone truly wished to prove the depth of their devotion, they must first complete a difficult task. The old stories tell us that 5 noble suitors remained. 5 men, each respected, each confident, each convinced that he alone would succeed. Rather than choosing between them, Princess Kaguya gave each man an impossible quest, not cruelly, nor to mock them, but perhaps to discover something about their character, or perhaps because she already knew none would truly understand her. The first nobleman received his challenge. He was asked to bring the sacred stone bathing bowl once used by the Buddha himself. According to ancient tradition, such a treasure existed far beyond Japan. Its journey would require courage, patience, and honesty. The nobleman accepted proudly. He departed with great confidence. Months passed, then many more. Eventually he returned. Within his hands rested an elegant stone bowl. Its surface appeared ancient, its craftsmanship beautiful. Many who saw it believed the task had been completed. The nobleman smiled, certain that success belonged to him. Princess Kaguya examined the bowl quietly. She held it beneath the morning light. The old tale tells us that a true sacred relic would possess a gentle radiance. Yet the bowl remained ordinary, beautiful but silent. It reflected sunlight, nothing more. The nobleman had not completed the journey. Instead, he had purchased an imitation. Beauty without truth. Princess Kaguya thanked him politely, then returned the bowl. No anger, no humiliation, simply quiet understanding. The second nobleman stepped forward. His task seemed no easier. He was instructed to obtain a jeweled branch from the mythical island of Hare, an island said to exist beyond the ordinary world. According to old legends, trees upon Hare bore branches of gold. Their leaves shimmered like silver. Their fruits glowed with precious jewels. Such places often appear within East Asian folklore, not as locations found upon maps, but as symbols of distant perfection. The nobleman departed confidently. Years seemed to pass. Then one autumn morning he returned carrying a magnificent branch. Its leaves sparkled brilliantly. Gold reflected the sunlight. Pearls and gemstones decorated every twig. The entire valley gathered to admire it. Surely such beauty could only have come from a mythical island. Princess Kaguya studied the branch carefully. Its craftsmanship truly was extraordinary, almost too extraordinary. Not long afterward, a group of skilled craftsmen arrived. They approached the nobleman, then politely requested payment. It was they, not the island of Hore, who had spent countless hours creating the beautiful branch. Every jewel, every leaf, every tiny detail had been fashioned by human hands. The nobleman's deception quietly revealed itself. The branch remained beautiful, yet its beauty had been built upon dishonesty. Again, Princess Kaguya simply returned the gift, without anger, without ridicule, only silence. The third nobleman received another remarkable task. He was asked to find the legendary robe woven from the fur of the fire rat. Stories claimed this extraordinary garment could never burn. No flame could damage it. No heat could leave even the smallest mark. The nobleman searched far and wide. Eventually he returned carrying an exquisite robe unlike anything seen before. Soft, elegant, perfectly woven. He declared it the genuine treasure. Princess Kaguya listened quietly. Then very gently a small flame was brought near the cloth. Almost immediately the robe caught fire. Within moments it became ash. The room remained silent. No harsh words were spoken. Sometimes truth requires no explanation. The fourth nobleman faced perhaps the most dangerous journey. He was asked to retrieve a brightly colored jewel said to rest around the neck of a dragon. Throughout East Asian mythology, dragons often symbolize wisdom, vain, power, and the untamed forces of nature. The nobleman gathered sailors, strong ships, experienced navigators, then set out across the sea. The journey quickly became difficult. Storm clouds gathered, great waves rose around the ships, thunder echoed across the ocean. The frightened crew begged to return home. Some versions of the story tell us the nobleman eventually abandoned the search. Others suggest the sea itself convinced him that some treasures should remain beyond human reach. Whatever truly happened, he never returned with the dragon's jewel. The final nobleman received the last impossible task. He was asked to retrieve the sacred shell hidden within the nest of the mysterious swallow. Unlike the others, his challenge seemed almost simple, until one realized no one truly knew where such a shell could ever be found. The nobleman searched tirelessly, climbing dangerous cliffs, exploring forgotten valleys, watching countless birds build their nests beneath old rooftops. At last he believed he had discovered the treasure. While climbing toward the nest, his footing slipped. The old stories tell us he survived. Though the search ended there, sometimes even determination cannot overcome the limits of fortune. One by one each nobleman departed. The valley slowly became quiet once again. The bamboo forest continued whispering in the wind. The old bamboo cutter resumed his peaceful work. Princess Kaguya often walked alone among the tall green stalks, watching sunlight dance gently between them. The strange excitement surrounding her had faded, yet something had quietly become clear. None of the noblemen had truly understood her. Some relied upon wealth, others upon deception, others upon ambition. Few paused simply to ask what kind of life she herself wished to live. The old storytellers rarely presented these impossible tasks merely as entertainment. Instead, they gently reminded listeners that beauty alone is never enough to build a lasting bond. Honesty matters, humility matters, and perhaps most importantly, the willingness to see another person not as something to possess but as someone to understand. Far beyond the quiet bamboo forest, another visitor had already heard the stories of Princess Kaguya. Unlike the five noblemen, his arrival would change the tale forever, for the news of the mysterious young woman had finally reached the imperial court itself. The quiet valley remained peaceful. Morning mist still drifted gently between the mountains. The bamboo forest continued whispering with every passing breeze. To those who lived there, very little had changed. The old bamboo cutter still rose before sunrise. His wife still tended the small garden beside their home. Princess Kaguya still found comfort beneath the shade of the bamboo grove where sunlight filtered softly through thousands of emerald stalks. Yet beyond the valley, her story had become something much greater. Travelers continued speaking of the mysterious young woman. Poets compared her beauty to the full moon reflected upon still water. Artists imagined her face, though few had ever truly seen it. Each telling grew slightly more wondrous than the last. Eventually the stories reached the capital. Far away from the quiet countryside, the imperial court stood at the center of Japanese life. Its elegant halls were filled with scholars, poets, musicians, officials dressed in beautiful layered robes. The High Court valued refinement above almost everything else. A carefully written poem could earn great admiration. The fragrance of incense, derangement of flowers, even the color of one's robes reflected the changing seasons. Beauty was not simply admired, it became a way of life. It was here among polished wooden halls and carefully tended gardens that the emperor first heard of Princess Kaguya. The stories sounded almost impossible. A young woman discovered inside glowing bamboo, beauty beyond compare, wisdom beyond her years. 5 noble suitors unable to win her heart. The emperor listened quietly. Unlike the others, he was not immediately captivated by her appearance alone. Instead, he became curious. How could one person inspire such remarkable stories? Were they merely exaggerations, as stories often become? Or had something truly extraordinary appeared within the distant mountains? Curiosity, perhaps more than anything else, has always encouraged people to seek distant places. The emperor wished to meet her. Messengers traveled from the capital. Their journey took many days. Roads wound through forests, across rivers, past farming villages where life moved at its familiar pace. Eventually they reached the humble home of the bamboo cutter. The emperor's request was delivered with great respect. Princess Kaguya listened quietly. Then she gently declined, not out of disrespect, nor out of fear. She simply wished to remain where she belonged. The messengers returned to the capital. Their answer surprised many. Few people refused an invitation from the emperor himself. Yet the emperor did not become angry. Instead, his curiosity deepened. Some time later he decided to travel himself, not with a great army, not with displays of power, but quietly. The old stories tell us that when he finally met Princess Kaguya, he immediately understood why so many had spoken of her with such admiration. Her beauty certainly remained remarkable, yet it was something else that lingered in memory. A quiet calmness, a gentle dignity, a peaceful presence. She seemed entirely comfortable within the simple life she had chosen. The emperor spoke kindly. The conversations wandered through poetry, nature, the changing seasons, and the quiet pleasures of ordinary life. Unlike many before him, he did not boast. He did not seek impossible treasures. He simply enjoyed speaking with her. Over time, the emperor came to care deeply for Princess Kaguya. He hoped she might someday join him within the imperial palace. Its gardens were among the finest in Japan, its libraries filled with beautiful writings. Musicians performed elegant melodies beneath blooming cherry trees. Surely such a place could offer every happiness. Yet Princess Kaguya smiled gently, then declined once more. The palace, though magnificent, could never replace the peaceful bamboo forest where she had grown, nor the small home where the old couple had loved her without expecting anything in return. The emperor respected her decision, though disappointment quietly settled within his heart. Rather than forgetting her, he continued sending letters, poems carefully written upon fine paper. Season after season messages traveled between the quiet valley and the distant capital. The exchange reflected a beautiful tradition of the Heian period. Letters were rarely ordinary. They often became works of art. The paper itself might carry delicate colors, its fragrance carefully chosen. A single poem beautifully written could express emotions more deeply than many spoken conversations. Even today, these surviving poems offer us small windows into the hearts of people who lived over 1,000 years ago. Princess Kaguya always replied with kindness. Her words remained thoughtful, gentle, yet they also carried a quiet sadness difficult to explain. Sometimes, while walking alone beneath the moon, she would suddenly stop. Her gaze lifted toward the night sky. The full moon seemed to hold her attention longer with each passing season. The old bamboo cutter began noticing these quiet moments. His daughter, usually so peaceful now, sometimes appeared distant. She continued smiling. She continued caring for those around her. Yet something deep within her thoughts had changed. Summer slowly gave way to autumn. The bamboo leaves whispered beneath cooler winds. Maple trees covering distant hills gradually turned shades of crimson and gold. Harvest festivals brought laughter to nearby villages. Life continued as it always had. Still each month, when the full moon rose high above the mountains, Princess Kaguya became quieter. She often stood outside long after everyone else had gone to sleep, looking upward, not searching, not hoping, simply watching. The old couple worried. Very gently asked whether something troubled her. At first she offered only a quiet smile. Then as another autumn moon illuminated the valley, she finally spoke. She explained that she had always known, though only faintly, that she did not truly belong to the ordinary world. Somewhere beyond the sky, beyond the clouds, beyond even the moon itself, there existed another home. A place she could barely remember, yet somehow never completely forgot. The memories came softly, like dreams fading upon waking. Never clear, never complete. Only gentle feelings carried upon moonlight. As each full moon passed, those forgotten memories grew stronger. The old bamboo cutter listened in silence. His wife quietly held Kaguya's hands. Neither wished to believe such words. To them she was simply their daughter, the child discovered within the glowing bamboo. Nothing more was needed, yet the sadness in her voice could not be mistaken. The peaceful days they had shared, though precious, would not last forever. The moon above the quiet valley seemed brighter now. Its silver light rested gently across the bamboo grove, across the mountains, across the small wooden house that had become a home. And somewhere far beyond the reach of ordinary eyes, something had already begun its slow journey toward the earth, patiently, silently, waiting for the night when Princess Kaguya would finally be called home. Autumn gradually settled across the mountains. The days became cooler. Morning mist lingered a little longer above the valleys. The forests surrounding the bamboo grove slowly transformed into shades of gold, crimson, and deep amber. Farmers gathered the final harvest before winter. Villages prepared for colder nights. Smoke drifted gently upward from countless wooden homes. Life continued with the quiet rhythm it always had, yet within the bamboo cutter's home time seemed to move differently. Princess Kaguya smiled less often, not because happiness had left her, but because memory had begun to return. Each full moon brought with it emotion she could not completely explain. She often stood alone outside the house after sunset. The old bamboo swayed softly around her. The mountain air remained still. Above, the moon seemed impossibly bright. Sometimes the old bamboo cutter quietly joined her. Neither spoke. There are moments when words become unnecessary. The silence itself becomes a conversation. He looked toward the moon only because she did, trying to understand, trying to see whatever she saw. Yet to him it remained only the familiar moon that had watched over his family for countless seasons. To Princess Kaguya it had become something else entirely, a distant home. One evening, as another full moon rose slowly above the eastern mountains, she finally told her parents everything she could remember. Her voice remained calm, gentle, never hurried. She explained that she had not been born within the world of ordinary people. Long ago, for reasons she herself could no longer fully recall, she had been sent from the moon. The glowing bamboo, their mysterious light, even her sudden appearance had all been part of a journey begun before she could remember. The bamboo cutter closed his eyes. He had suspected there was always something extraordinary about the child he had found. Yet hearing those words spoken aloud made them feel suddenly real. His wife quietly wiped away tears. For parents, it matters little where a child comes from. Love does not ask such questions. To them she had laughed beside the garden. She had helped prepare meals. She had grown beneath their roof. Those memories were stronger than any mystery. Princess Kaguya gently held both of their hands. She thanked them, not for raising a princess, not for caring for someone extraordinary, simply for loving a lonely child without expecting anything in return. Old Japanese folk tales often speak softly about gratitude, rarely through grand speeches, instead through small moments, shared meals, quiet evenings, simple kindness remembered long after years have passed. Outside, the wind moved through the bamboo. Its familiar whisper filled the night. Perhaps it had sounded exactly the same on the morning she first arrived. Some things change very little even while lives quietly transform. Word eventually reached the Emperor. When he learned that Princess Kaguya believed she would soon leave the earth, he refused to accept it. Surely if she wished to remain, someone could prevent her departure. He ordered trusted guards to travel to the bamboo cutter's home. They surrounded the small house. Archers stood watch through the night. Soldiers remained alert beneath the moonlight. Never before had such protection surrounded so humble a home. Yet no one complained. Every person present understood they were protecting someone deeply cherished. The bamboo cutter felt a small measure of comfort. Perhaps if enough people stood together, the future could be changed. The full moon of late autumn finally arrived. The valley rested beneath silver light. Not a single cloud crossed the sky. The air remained perfectly still. Even the bamboo seemed unusually quiet. Inside the small house no one slept. The old couple remained beside Princess Kaguya. Outside, the Emperor's guards watched every path leading toward the valley. Hours passed. Nothing happened. The moon climbed higher. Then very slowly a strange radiance appeared above the mountains. It was unlike sunrise, unlike lightning, unlike fire. Its light remained soft, almost gentle, yet impossibly bright. The soldiers looked upward. Some instinctively reached for their bows. Others simply stared. The light descended without sound. Clouds of white brilliance seemed to drift through the night sky, not carried by wind, but moving with quiet purpose. As they approached, the entire valley became illuminated. The bamboo glowed pale silver. The rooftops shimmered. Even the distant river reflected the strange light. The guards attempted to stand firm. Yet many found themselves unable to move, not because of fear, but because a profound peace settled over everything. The old stories describe no battle, no struggle, no violence, only stillness. Sometimes the greatest moments in folklore arrive not through loud spectacle but through quiet inevitability. From within the radiant light, heavenly figures slowly appeared. Their robes flowed like drifting clouds. Their faces remained calm. Their footsteps made no sound upon the earth. They had come not to conquer, not to punish, only to guide Princess Kaguya home. The bamboo cutter stepped forward. His heart pleaded for more time. Just one more season, one more spring, one more ordinary morning. Yet he understood. Some journeys cannot be delayed forever. Princess Kaguya embraced her parents. Long and gently, the old woman wept quietly against her shoulder. The bamboo cutter held her hand as though trying to remember every small detail. Neither wished to let go. She thanked them once more for every meal shared together, every quiet evening, every season they had spent as a family. She told them those memories would remain with her no matter how distant her journey became. Then one of the heavenly visitors presented her with a robe. It shimmered softly beneath the moonlight. The old stories call it a heavenly robe. It possessed an unusual gift. Whoever wore it would leave behind the sorrows of the earthly world. Its purpose was not merely to clothe. It transformed memory itself. Princess Kaguya looked quietly at the robe. For a long moment she hesitated. If she wore it, would she forget the people who had become her family? Would the bamboo forest disappear from her heart? Would the little wooden house become only a fading dream? The thought filled her with quiet sadness. Before accepting the robe, she took one final look around the valley. The mountains, the whispering bamboo, the garden, the familiar roof beneath which she had grown. Every ordinary thing had become precious. Perhaps that is one of the oldest lessons hidden within this tale. We rarely understand the value of ordinary days until we realize they cannot last forever. The valley became silent once again. Only moments earlier the enormous serpent had filled the air with its heavy breathing. Its 8 heads had slowly lowered toward the waiting vats. One after another, each had drunk deeply of the fragrant sake prepared by the old couple. Now the great creature rested. The forests no longer trembled beneath its movements. The river flowed peacefully beside its immense body. Even the birds, which had fallen strangely quiet as the serpent approached, slowly began returning to the branches above. For the first time in many years the valley felt calm. Yet Susanoo remained perfectly still. He understood that this peaceful moment would not last forever. Even the strongest drink eventually loses its hold. Sooner or later Yamada no Urachi would awaken. The opportunity before him would disappear. Very gently he placed one hand upon the hilt of his sword. The blade remained inside its scabbard. There was no rush. The myths often surprise us in this way. Modern stories frequently celebrate speed. Heroes charge forward without hesitation. Ancient Japanese myths often move differently, deliberately, patiently, almost respectfully. Standing before the sleeping serpent, Susanoo did not appear triumphant. He appeared thoughtful. Perhaps even creatures capable of terrible destruction deserved a final moment of peace before their story came to an end. The old chronicles tell us that the serpent slept deeply. The sake had done exactly what Susanoo hoped. Its enormous head rested heavily upon the earth. Its vast body wound quietly through the valley like a mountain range shaped by ancient rivers. Looking upon such a creature, one almost forgets that it had brought sorrow to this place for so many years. Nature often carries this strange contradiction. A thunderstorm viewed safely from afar can appear breathtakingly beautiful. An ocean during sunset may seem perfectly calm even though those same waters have claimed countless ships throughout history. Beauty and danger often exist side by side. Perhaps Yamada no Urachi represented that same truth. With one final steady breath, Susanoo drew his sword. The sound echoed softly through the quiet valley. Not loud, not dramatic. Simply the familiar sound of polished steel leaving its resting place. Sunlight reflected briefly across the blade. The forests watched silently. The river continued flowing. The mountains remained unchanged. Nature itself neither celebrated nor mourned what was about to happen. It simply endured. According to the ancient stories Susanoo struck, the sleeping serpent never fully understood what had happened. The myths do not linger upon the battle. Unlike many legends from around the world, Japanese mythology often moves surprisingly quickly through moments of violence. The focus is rarely the fight itself. Instead, it rests upon what the struggle means. For years, the valley had lived beneath fear. Parents had watched each passing season with quiet dread. Every year brought another impossible farewell. Now that long cycle was finally ending. One by one the great heads of Urachi fell silent. The forests that had grown upon its back remained untouched. Moss still covered its ancient scales. The river flowed around its enormous body exactly as it always had. It is almost as though nature had already begun accepting what would soon become another part of the landscape. Then something unexpected happened. As Susanoo examined the serpent's immense body, his sword suddenly stopped. The blade struck something impossibly hard. Not bone, not stone. Something hidden deep within one of Urachi's tails. Curious, he carefully opened the tail. Inside rested a sword unlike any he had ever seen. The old texts describe it as a magnificent blade of extraordinary beauty. Its surface gleamed despite having remained hidden for untold ages. No rust touched it. No passage of time seemed able to diminish it. Even today no one knows exactly why the sword rested within the serpent. The myths never fully explain. Perhaps it had always belonged there. Perhaps it represented a mystery even older than Urachi itself. Ancient stories often leave such questions unanswered, not because the storytellers lacked imagination, but because mystery allows every generation to wonder for itself. Susanoo immediately recognized that this was no ordinary weapon. Rather than keeping it for himself, he chose to present the sword to Amaterasu. It became an offering, a gesture of reconciliation after everything that had happened between them. There is something quietly beautiful about this moment. Earlier Susanoo's actions had driven the sun into hiding. Now he offered one of the greatest treasures in the world to his sister. The myths rarely suggest that people remain forever trapped by their mistakes. Instead, they often leave room for change, for growth, for redemption. The sword became known by several names throughout history. Perhaps the most famous is *Kusanargi no Tsurugi*** a grass-cutting sword. Centuries later, it would become one of Japan's 3 sacred treasures. alongside the mirror that had helped bring Amaterasu from the cave and the sacred jewel passed down through the heavenly family. These three treasures would eventually become symbols of the Japanese imperial household, not because of their material value, but because of the stories they carried. A mirror reminding people to see clearly, a jewel representing harmony, a sword reminding them that strength should exist alongside wisdom. It is remarkable how often Japanese mythology places objects at the center of its stories. A spear creates the first island, a mirror restores the sun, a sword emerges from a serpent. Simple things, yet each quietly changes the course of history. With Urashima, the valley became peaceful once more. The old couple no longer feared the passing years. Cushion Adaheim stepped safely from the comb in which Susanoo had protected her. The sorrow that had lingered over the family for so long slowly disappeared. The rivers continued flowing. The forests continued growing. Life quietly moved forward. Susanoo and Cushion Adaheim were married. Together they built a new home in the land of Izumo. According to one of Japan's oldest surviving poems, as Susanoo looked upon the gentle hills surrounding his new home, he composed a few simple lines celebrating the clouds drifting peacefully above the mountains. Many scholars believe this may be among the earliest poems preserved in Japanese literature. It is a gentle ending for someone once known only for storms. Perhaps that is fitting. Even the wind eventually becomes calm. Even the sea finds moments of perfect stillness. And even those who have made great mistakes may someday build peaceful homes beneath quiet skies. As the years pass, the tale of Yamada no Orochi spread from village to village. Parents told it beside evening fires. Travelers repeated it while crossing mountain roads. Monks carefully copied it into ancient manuscripts, not simply because people enjoyed stories of heroes, but because the tale quietly reminded them that even the greatest storms eventually pass. And after every storm, the rivers continue flowing, the forests continue growing, and life patiently begins again. Long after the first islands had risen from the sea, long after the heavens welcomed the light of Amaterasu once again, and long after Susanoo's battle with the great serpent had become one of Japan's oldest legends, another story quietly began. Unlike the myths of creation, this tale did not begin among the Kalmi. It began beside the sea, with a single white hare. Among all the old stories of Japan, few are as gentle as the tale of the white hare of Inaba. There are no great battles stretching across mountains, no dragons sleeping beneath forests, no heavenly caves hiding the sun. Instead, it tells a quieter story, one about pride, kindness, pain, and compassion, the kind of story that might easily have been told beside a small fire as evening slowly settled over a peaceful village. Imagine a lonely island resting just beyond the shore. Not large, only a small piece of land rising quietly above the sea. Upon that island lived a white hare. Its fur shone brightly beneath the morning sun. Its ears stood tall whenever the sea breeze drifted across the grass. From the island, the hare often gazed toward the distant mainland. There great forests stretched beyond the beaches. Rolling hills disappeared into blue mountains. Flowers bloomed across quiet meadows. Birds crossed the sky without ever reaching the end of the land. Every day the hare wondered what lay beyond the sea. Curiosity is a familiar feeling. Perhaps every traveler, every explorer, every child looking beyond the horizon has shared it. The hare wished to leave, yet one problem remained. The sea. Unlike birds, the hare could not fly. Unlike fish, it could not swim such a great distance. Day after day it searched for another way. Then one morning the hare noticed something moving beneath the waves. A crocodile. Or perhaps more accurately, one of the great sea creatures described within the ancient Japanese texts. Modern translations often call them crocodiles, though scholars believe they may originally have represented sharks or other powerful creatures of the sea. Whatever their exact appearance, the story remains the same. The hare watched quietly as the great creature approached the shore. Then an unusual idea entered its mind. Instead of asking for help honestly, the hare chose cleverness. Standing upon a smooth rock, it called out across the water. It praised the great sea creature. Then it proposed a game. "Tell me," the hare asked, "which family do you think is larger, mine or yours?" The sea creature paused, perhaps surprised by such an unusual question. The hare continued, "There is only one way to know. Gather every member of your family. Ask them to form a line stretching all the way from this island to the mainland. Then my own family will do the same one day. Whichever line proves longer will reveal the answer." The sea creature considered the challenge. Pride quietly entered its heart. Surely its own family filled the sea beyond counting. Agreeing to the contest, it called for the others. Soon one after another great sea creatures appeared beneath the waves, until they formed an unbroken line stretching across the ocean, from the lonely island all the way to the distant shore. The sea itself seemed alive, back after back creating a living bridge. The hare smiled. Very politely it thanked them. Then it began hopping, one back after another, lightly, carefully, never stopping. The sea stretched quietly beneath. The mainland slowly grew nearer. The forests looked larger now, the mountains clearer. Soon only one leap remained. The hare had almost reached safety. Almost. Then, unable to resist, it laughed. Turning toward the sea creatures, it confessed the truth. There never was any contest. It said, "I only wish to cross the sea." The words had scarcely left its mouth when everything changed. The sea creatures immediately understood they had been deceived. Their pride had been used against them. The last creature rose from the waves. With one sudden movement it caught the hare. The ancient story tells us that its beautiful white fur was stripped away. When the frightened hare finally reached the shore, its skin was raw, painful, exposed to the wind. Every step became agony. The once beautiful animal now wandered alone across the beach. There is something quietly important about this moment. The story never suggests the hare deserved endless suffering. It simply reminds us that cleverness without honesty often carries unexpected consequences. The hare continued walking, slowly, painfully, until far along the road it encountered a group of travelers. These travelers were no ordinary people. They were the many brothers of a young kami named ****. The brothers were handsome, well-dressed, confident. They were traveling together toward the land of Inaba, for they all hoped to win the hand of the beautiful Princess Ikomi. As they noticed the suffering hare, the animal begged for help. Surely someone among so many travelers would know how to ease its pain. The brothers looked upon the injured creature. Then perhaps amused, perhaps simply careless, they gave terrible advice. They told the hare to wash itself in the salt water of the sea, then stand beneath the hot wind until completely dry. The exhausted hare trusted them. Slowly it returned to the shore. The cool waves touched its wounded skin. For a brief moment the water felt soothing. Then the salt began working. Every wound burned. Every movement became more painful than before. Still remembering the traveler's instructions, the hare climbed onto the rocks. The wind blew steadily from the sea. As the salt dried, its skin tightened. The pain became almost unbearable. The hare cried out, not from anger, not from fear, simply because it hurt. Sometimes ancient stories remind us that suffering does not always arrive through cruelty. Sometimes it arrives because someone speaks carelessly, because someone chooses convenience instead of kindness. The old storytellers understood this well. Words themselves carry weight. Long after the brothers had disappeared along the road, one final traveler quietly approached. Unlike the others, he walked alone. He carried no great pride, no hurried confidence. He simply noticed the small white hare sitting quietly beside the path, and unlike everyone before him, he stopped. The young traveler paused beside the hare. He did not continue walking. He did not pretend not to notice, nor did he laugh. He simply stopped. Sometimes the smallest kindness begins exactly this way, by allowing ourselves to notice another living creature. The road stretching through the countryside remained peaceful. The sea breeze continued drifting gently across the grasses. Clouds wandered lazily overhead. Nothing about the landscape had changed. Yet for the suffering hare everything was about to become different. The traveler knelt beside the animal. His voice was calm. There was no judgment, no anger toward those who had come before him, only quiet concern. He asked what happened to you. The hare slowly told its story. It spoke of the lonely island, the endless sea, the clever trick, the line of sea creatures stretching across the water, its laughter, its mistake, then the terrible pain that followed. Finally it explained how the travelers before him had instructed it to wash itself in salt water and stand beneath the drying wind. The young traveler listened without interruption. When the hare finished speaking, he remained silent for a moment. Perhaps he was thinking. Perhaps he simply wished to choose his words carefully. The ancient storytellers rarely rushed conversations like these. Wisdom often arrives quietly, not loudly. Eventually he smiled gently. You have been given poor advice. There was no mockery in his voice, only compassion. He pointed toward a nearby river flowing peacefully through the fields. Its water was clear, fresh from the mountains. Unlike the sea, it carried no salt. He said, go to the river, wash yourself carefully, then gather the soft pollen from the flowering reeds growing beside the water. Lie down upon it and rest. Nothing more. No magic, no powerful spell, no miracle descending from the heavens. Simply clean water, soft flowers, and rest. There is something wonderfully peaceful about this part of the story. Healing does not arrive through violence, nor through extraordinary power. It arrives through gentleness. The hare trusted him. Slowly it made its way toward the river. The cool, fresh water touched its wounded skin. Unlike the sea, it did not sting. It soothed. Every careful movement washed away the dried salt. The pain slowly lessened. Nearby golden pollen rested lightly upon tall flowering plants swaying gently in the breeze. The hare rolled carefully among the blossoms. Tiny grains settled softly across its wounded body. The pollen protected the skin. The cool breeze no longer burned. Little by little comfort returned. Imagine that peaceful river, morning sunlight reflecting softly across its surface, dragonflies gliding silently above the reeds, the gentle sound of flowing water, wildflowers moving slowly whenever the wind passed. There are few places more calming than the edge of a quiet stream. Perhaps that is why the storytellers chose such a place for healing. Nature itself becomes the medicine. Time passed peacefully. The hare rested. The river continued flowing. The flowers continued blooming. The wind remained gentle. Eventually something remarkable happened. Its beautiful white fur slowly returned. The wounds disappeared. The pain faded into memory. The little hare stood once again, healthy, bright, as though the suffering had never happened. Yet the experience had changed it. Sometimes the deepest lessons remain long after the wounds themselves have healed. The hare looked toward the young traveler. Gratitude filled its heart. Unlike the others, this stranger had expected nothing in return. He had simply chosen kindness. The hare approached him quietly. According to the old story, it spoke, not as an ordinary animal, but with wisdom beyond its appearance. It revealed something surprising. The proud brothers who had walked ahead, those hoping to marry Princess Hikomi, would not succeed. Instead, the princess would choose the young traveler standing before the hare. His name was Okuninashi, one of the most beloved kami in Japanese mythology. The hare smiled, not with cleverness this time, but with understanding. It is you, the hare said, whom she will choose, not because of wealth, not because of appearance, but because your heart is kind. The prophecy quietly settled into the morning air. Then the hare disappeared into the surrounding fields, leaving only the peaceful river behind. The old tale continues. When Okuninashi eventually reached the land of Inaba, everything happened exactly as the hare had foretold. Princess Hikomi looked upon the many proud brothers. Then she chose the one who had stopped to help a suffering stranger. Not the strongest, Not the richest, not the most confident, simply the kindest. It is a remarkably gentle ending. The story never suggests kindness guarantees an easy life. In truth, Okuninashi's greatest adventures were only beginning. Many more hardships awaited him, many more trials. Yet this small moment beside the river remained one of the reasons later generations admired him so deeply, because true character often reveals itself through quiet actions. Not great speeches, not impossible victories, simply stopping to help. For centuries, parents told this story to their children. Monks copied it into manuscripts. Travelers shared it beside evening fires. The white hare became far more than a clever animal. It became a reminder that pride may carry us only so far, that honesty matters, and that compassion, even when offered to the smallest creature beside the road, may quietly change the course of an entire life. The river, where the hare found healing, continued flowing long after everyone involved had become part of memory. Spring continued bringing flowers to its banks. Autumn painted the nearby hills in gold and crimson. Winter covered the reeds with delicate frost. Then spring returned once again. Nature never hurried. It simply continued, much like the old stories themselves, passing gently from one generation to the next. And somewhere beyond another quiet stretch of coastline another tale was waiting, one involving a humble fisherman, a mysterious turtle, and a palace hidden beneath the endless sea. The sea has always held a special place within Japanese stories. Long before modern harbors welcomed great ships, before fishing villages became busy ports, and before lighthouses guided sailors safely home, the ocean was already filled with mystery. Each morning its surface reflected the changing colors of the sky, sometimes perfectly calm like polished glass stretching toward the horizon. Other days great waves rolled endlessly toward the shore. The sea could provide food. It could carry travelers to distant islands. It could also hide countless secrets beneath its quiet surface. For thousands of years, people standing upon Japan's rocky coastline have looked toward the endless horizon and wondered what lies beyond. Perhaps no Japanese folktale captures that feeling more gently than the story of Urashima Tarō. Unlike the great myths of the kami, this tale begins very simply. No heavenly palaces, no dragons, no sacred treasures, only a quiet fishing village resting beside the sea. Imagine a small coastal village many centuries ago. Wooden homes stand facing the water. Fishing nets hang outside to dry beneath the afternoon sun. Children run happily along the beach. Small boats rise and fall gently with each passing wave. Seagulls circle lazily overhead. The scent of salt drifts softly through the air. Life moves at an unhurried pace. Every morning begins with the tide. Every evening ends with the sound of waves meeting the shore. Among the villagers lived a young fisherman named Urashima Tarō. The old stories never describe him as especially wealthy, nor as unusually strong. He was simply known as someone kind, patient, and respectful toward both people and nature. Each morning before sunrise painted the eastern sky, he quietly pushed his small wooden boat into the water. The sea greeted him as it always had. Gentle waves, cool morning air, the distant cries of seabirds welcoming another day. Fishing requires patience. One cannot hurry the tide, nor command the fish. Instead, one learns to wait, to observe, to accept whatever the sea quietly chooses to offer. Perhaps that patient rhythm shaped Urashima himself. One afternoon after returning from the sea, he walked slowly along the beach. The tide had begun receding. Tiny shells sparkled beneath the sunlight. Small crabs hurried between smooth rocks. Everything seemed wonderfully ordinary. Then he heard shouting. A group of children had gathered near the shoreline. At first he smiled. Children often played noisily beside the sea, yet something about their voices sounded different, not joyful, excited, curious. As he approached, he saw the reason. A small sea turtle lay stranded upon the sand. It had wandered too far from the waves. unable to return. The children surrounded it. Some poked gently at its shell. Others laughed, not from cruelty, simply from childish curiosity. The turtle withdrew into its shell, unable to understand what was happening. Urashima quietly stepped forward. He did not scold the children. He simply knelt beside the little turtle. Very gently he lifted it with both hands. Its shell felt cool beneath his fingers. A few grains of sand still clung to its legs. The turtle remained perfectly still, perhaps frightened, perhaps simply waiting. Urashima carried it toward the water. The waves reached his feet. The cool sea washed softly around his ankles. Then he lowered the turtle back into its home. For a brief moment it floated quietly beside him, almost as though it wished to understand the face of the person who had helped it. Then with one graceful movement it disappeared beneath the waves. The sea returned to its usual rhythm. The children wandered away. The beach became peaceful once more. Urashima thought little more about the encounter. After all, helping a small creature seemed hardly worth remembering. Many acts of kindness happen this way, quietly, without expectation, without reward. The following morning sea appeared unusually calm. Not a single cloud disturbed the bright blue sky. Urashima pushed his boat into the gentle waves once again. Far from the shore he cast his fishing line. The hours passed peacefully. The only sounds were the soft splash of water against the wooden boat and the distant cries of seabirds drifting overhead. Then something unexpected happened. From beneath the clear water, familiar shapes slowly emerged. The same turtle, yet somehow it seemed larger now, older. Its movements carried an unusual grace. The turtle swam quietly beside the boat. Then, according to the old story, it spoke. Its voice was calm, warm, almost musical. It thanked Urashima for saving its life the day before. The fisherman listened in quiet astonishment. The turtle explained that someone wished to meet him, someone living far beneath the sea, in a place no ordinary traveler had ever visited, the Dragon Palace. **Kyugujo.***. Even today their name carries a dreamlike quality. A palace resting beneath the ocean, where coral forms great halls, where pearls shine like stars, where time itself flows differently. Urashima hesitated. The sea stretched endlessly round him. The village lay far behind. The turtle waited patiently. There was no pressure, only an invitation. Curiosity slowly overcame hesitation. Urashima nodded. The turtle smiled. Then something extraordinary happened. The sea itself seemed to open. The turtle gently invited him onto its broad shell. The fisherman climbed carefully aboard. Without hurry, the turtle began swimming. At first, a familiar surface remained around them. Sunlight danced upon the gentle waves. The sky reflected perfectly in the calm sea. Little by little the turtle descended. The surface slowly drifted farther above. Sunlight filtered through the clear blue water in shimmering beams. Schools of silver fish surrounded them. Seaweed moved gracefully with the currents. The deeper they traveled, the quieter everything became. There was no fear, only wonder. The ocean revealed a world few people had ever imagined. Great forests of swaying kelp stretched across the seafloor like underwater cedar groves. Bright coral formed gardens more colorful than any flowers upon land. Tiny fish shimmered like scattered jewels. Sea turtles drifted peacefully through shafts of sunlight. Even the water itself seemed filled with gentle light. The farther they descended, the more beautiful the world became. At last, in the distance, something magnificent slowly appeared. Not a mountain, not an island, a palace. Its rooftops shimmered like polished jade. Great gates carved from coral welcomed arriving visitors. Columns of pearl rose toward the ceiling of the sea. Colorful fish swam peacefully through open courtyards. Sea plants waved gently beside crystal pathways. Everything moved with quiet elegance. No rushing crowds, no loud voices, only the soft rhythm of the ocean surrounding every wall. Urashima could scarcely believe what he was seeing. The turtle turned toward him. Its eyes shone kindly, then it spoke once more. "Welcome," it said softly, "to you, Gujo." And standing beyond the palace gates waiting with a gentle smile was a princess unlike anyone he had ever met. The palace beneath the sea stood in perfect silence, not the silence of loneliness, but the peaceful silence found in places untouched by hurry. Soft currents drifted gently through gardens of coral. Tiny silver fish moved together like living ribbons of light. Shells rested quietly along white stone pathways polished smooth by countless years beneath the ocean. Above, far beyond the crystal blue water, the surface of the sea shimmered faintly like another sky. Urashima Tarō remained still. Everything before him felt impossible, yet somehow nothing felt frightening. The Dragon Palace did not seem like a place built to impress visitors. Instead, it felt as though it had always existed, patiently waiting beneath the waves. Its great gates stood open. Columns carved from enormous pieces of coral stretched high above elegant halls. Their surfaces reflected soft blue light that danced constantly through the moving water. Pearls larger than a person's hand rested within carefully crafted lanterns. Instead of flames, they glowed with a quiet radiance that never flickered. The entire palace seemed alive, not with noise but with gentle movement. Sea grasses swayed gracefully beside stone bridges. Colorful fish drifted through open courtyards without fear. Even the banners hanging from the palace roof moved slowly with the rhythm of the currents. Nature had not been separated from the palace. It had become part of it. Standing near the entrance waiting with quiet elegance was the princess of the Dragon Palace. Her name, according to most versions of the story, was **Adoham**, the daughter of the Dragon King. She bowed gently as Urashima approached. There was no ceremony filled with loud music, no announcement echoing through the halls. Only kindness. She thanked him once again for saving the little turtle. Only now did Urashima understand. The turtle had not been ordinary. It had served the Dragon Palace. Some stories even suggest it had been connected directly to Adoheim herself. Whether this was truly so, the old storytellers never completely reveal. Mystery often makes beautiful stories even more beautiful. Adoheim welcomed him inside. As they crossed the palace grounds, Urashima noticed things unlike anything he had ever imagined. Gardens filled with corals shaped like blooming flowers. Trees whose branches were formed from red and white sea fans. Pools where brilliantly colored fish swam beneath floating lotus blossoms that somehow grew even beneath the sea. Everything appeared peaceful, perfectly balanced. No gardener hurried to trim the plants. No servant rushed from room to room. The palace seemed to care for itself, almost as though the ocean gently watched over every corner. Inside the great hall, a magnificent feast had been prepared. Tables carved from polished shell reflected the soft light filling the room. Beautiful dishes rested upon elegant lacquerware. Fresh fruits, delicate sweets, fish prepared in ways Urashima had never before seen. Tea served in cups as smooth as river stones. Everything was arranged with extraordinary care. The princess invited him to sit. There was no expectation, only hospitality. Throughout Japanese history, welcoming a guest has always carried deep meaning. To offer food, tea, comfort, is to quietly say you are safe here. Perhaps the Dragon Palace reflected that tradition in its most perfect form. As they shared the meal, the princess asked about the world above. She wished to hear about forests, about mountain villages, about birds greeting the sunrise, about fishermen waiting patiently for the morning tide. Urashima spoke happily. He described children running along quiet beaches, cherry blossoms falling beside country roads, autumn leaves drifting into clear rivers, the sound of temple bells echoing through misty valleys. The princess listened with genuine wonder, for although she ruled beneath the sea, the world above remained just as mysterious to her. The exchange feels wonderfully balanced. The fisherman dreamed of the sea. The princess dreamed of the land. Each carried curiosity about the other's world. After the meal, Adoheim invited Urashima to explore the palace. Together they wandered through magnificent halls. One room reflected the colors of spring. Cherry blossoms seemed forever caught in full bloom. Soft petals drifted endlessly through warm air. Nearby another chamber held the freshness of summer. Clear streams flowed gently through gardens filled with deep green leaves. Dragonflies danced above quiet ponds. The scent of flowering plants filled the air. The next room welcomed autumn. Golden leaves covered peaceful pathways. Bright red maple trees reflected upon calm water. The gentle feeling of late afternoon surrounded everything. Then winter. Snow rested softly upon pine branches. Ice shimmered beneath pale blue light. Yet despite the cold beauty, the room felt strangely warm, comfortable, peaceful. Some versions of the tale describe these chambers as representing the 4 seasons. Others leave them to imagination. Whatever their original meaning, they remind us how deeply Japanese culture has always cherished the changing seasons. Each season possesses its own beauty. None should remain forever. As the days passed, Urashima found himself forgetting the passage of time. Morning and evening became difficult to distinguish beneath the sea. The palace always remained beautiful. The gardens always remained peaceful. Music drifted softly through the halls. Sometimes musicians played delicate melodies unlike anything heard upon land. Sometimes there was only the gentle sound of water moving beyond the palace walls. No one hurried him. No one expected anything in return. Life beneath the sea unfolded with extraordinary calm. How long he remained there, no one truly knows. Some stories suggest only 3 days. Others speak of weeks. Some simply say a little while. Time itself seemed different beneath the ocean. Perhaps that was always part of the Dragon Palace's quiet mystery. Eventually, a thought slowly entered Urashima's heart. He began thinking about home, his village, his family, the familiar beach where he had spent so many peaceful mornings, the little wooden boat waiting upon the shore, the mountains rising beyond the sea. Even paradise cannot completely erase the memory of home. The princess noticed the quiet change within him. She asked gently, "Are you unhappy here?" Urashima smiled softly. "No," he answered. "I have never known such peace." He looked toward the distant blue light filtering down from the surface. "But I wonder how everyone above is doing." "I should return, if only for a little while." The princess lowered her eyes. For a long moment she said nothing. Perhaps she had always known this day would arrive. Guests eventually return home. Seasons eventually change. The tide always comes in and always goes out again. Finally she nodded. "If your heart wishes to return," she said quietly, "I will not stop you." But before you leave, she reached beside her. There rested a small, beautifully decorated box. Its surface shimmered like polished lacquer beneath the blue light of the sea. Fine cords of silk wrapped carefully around its lid. It appeared surprisingly ordinary. No glowing jewels, no magical symbols, simply a small box. The princess placed it gently into Urashima's hands. "This is called the **Temidbarko**, she said. "There is only one promise I ask of you. Never open it." Urashima looked down at the little box. He nodded respectfully. "I promise." Outside, the gentle sea currents continued their endless journey through coral gardens. The turtle waited patiently near the palace gates, ready to carry him home. Neither of them yet knew that the greatest mystery of the Dragon Palace had never been its beauty, nor its treasures, nor even the palace itself. Urashima held the small box carefully in both hands, the silk cord wrapped neatly around its polished surface. It felt surprisingly light, not heavy with gold, not filled with jewels, just a simple wooden box. The Princess Adohime smiled gently. There was no sadness upon her face, only quiet understanding. Perhaps she had welcomed many guests before him. Perhaps she already knew that no matter how beautiful a distant place may be, their human heart eventually begins searching for home. The Dragon Palace remained peaceful around them. Schools of colorful fish drifted through coral gardens. The soft blue light filtering down from the distant surface painted gentle patterns across the stone pathways. Nothing urged him to leave. Nothing tried to convince him to stay. The palace simply continued existing. Calm, patient, timeless. The great turtle waited once again near the palace gates. Its broad shell reflected the shimmering light of the sea. As Urashima approached, it lowered itself, slightly inviting him aboard. Before climbing onto the turtle's back, Urashima turned toward the princess one final time. He bowed deeply, not as someone saying farewell forever, but as a grateful guest thanking a generous host. Adoheim returned the bow. Her voice remained soft. "There is only one thing I ask." She looked briefly toward the small box resting within his hands. "No matter what happens, never open the tamibargo." The fisherman nodded. "I promise." Promises often seem simple while we are making them. Only later, when time has passed, do we truly discover how difficult some promises become. The turtle gently pushed away from the palace. Little by little, the magnificent halls of Yugujo disappeared behind gardens of coral. The pearl lanterns became tiny points of light. The great gates slowly vanished into the blue distance. Soon only the endless ocean remained. The journey upward felt different from the journey down. When Urashima had first entered the sea, everything had been filled with wonder. Now his thoughts wandered elsewhere. He imagined his village. Perhaps the fishermen would already be preparing tomorrow's nets. Perhaps children still gathered every evening beside the shore. Perhaps the old pine tree overlooking the harbor still swayed gently in the sea breeze. He wondered whether anyone had missed him, whether his family had searched the coastline, whether his neighbors believed he had simply sailed farther than usual. The turtle continued swimming, slowly, gracefully. Schools of fish passed silently around them. Sunlight became brighter with every passing moment. The blue water gradually turned lighter. The warmth of the surface slowly returned. Then, with barely a ripple, the turtle emerged from the sea. Fresh air greeted them. The familiar scent of salt filled the breeze. Above, clouds drifted peacefully across the afternoon sky. For a brief moment, everything seemed exactly as Urashima remembered. The sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Gentle waves rolled toward the shore. Seabirds circled lazily overhead. The world appeared wonderfully familiar. The turtle carried him back to the beach. Its shell touched the sand. Urashima climbed down carefully. He thanked the faithful creature once again. The turtle bowed its head. Then, without another word, it disappeared beneath the waves. The sea became calm once more. Urashima smiled. His journey had truly ended. He turned toward the village, expecting familiar faces, familiar voices, the comforting rhythm of ordinary life. Instead, something felt strange. At first, he could not understand why. The beach itself looked different. The shoreline curved in unfamiliar ways. The path leading inland seemed wider than he remembered. Even the old rocks scattered along the coast appeared changed by countless tides. Perhaps he thought he had simply landed farther along the shore. He began walking. The village soon came into view. Yet it was not his village, or at least it did not feel like the place he had left. The houses stood in different places. Many looked newer, others had disappeared entirely. The narrow paths between the homes no longer followed the same routes. The old pine tree, the one that had stood proudly overlooking the harbor, was nowhere to be seen. Children played near the shoreline. Urashima smiled warmly. Perhaps they would recognize him. As he approached, the children looked back curiously. None smiled in recognition. None called his name. Instead, they whispered quietly among themselves, wondering who this unfamiliar traveler might be. Urashima stopped beside one of the fishermen repairing his nets. The man's face was unknown to him. Still, he asked politely, "Excuse me, could you tell me where the family of Urashima lives?" The fisherman looked puzzled. "Urashima?" he repeated slowly. "I've heard that name before." But he paused. "It belongs to a very old story." Urashima laughed softly. "No, I'm Urashima Tarō." The fisherman stared at him. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, the old fisherman shook his head gently. "My friend," he said kindly. "Urashima Tarō lived many, many years ago. My grandfather told me stories about him when I was a child. They say he disappeared into the sea and never returned. The words settled heavily between them. Urashima smiled uncertainly. Surely there had been some misunderstanding. He asked another villager, then another. Each gave a similar answer. His home no longer existed. His family had long since passed away. Even the oldest graves had weathered beneath centuries of rain and wind. The little fishing village he remembered had slowly become history. The sea, which had seemed so unchanged, to quietly watch generations come and go. Urashima walked slowly toward the shoreline once again. The waves still rolled gently across the sand, exactly as they always had. The sea had not forgotten him, yet the world beyond it no longer remembered his name. Only then did he begin understanding the true mystery of the Dragon Palace. Time had flowed differently beneath the sea. What had felt like only a short visit had become many years upon the land above. Perhaps decades, perhaps centuries. The old folk tales differ. Some say 300 years, others tell different numbers. The exact length scarcely matters. The meaning remains the same. Sometimes life changes quietly while we are looking elsewhere. Seasons pass. Children grow. Villages become towns. Forests slowly replace forgotten roads. The world never stops moving. Even when we believe only a little time has passed. Standing alone beside the waves, Urashima remembered the small box still resting safely within his hands. The tamé-bargo. He had kept his promise. He had never opened it. Yet now, surrounded by strangers in a world that no longer knew him, the promise suddenly felt much heavier than before. He looked toward the endless sea, wondering if perhaps the little box carried the final answer to everything he had lost. The little wooden box rested quietly within Urashima's hands. It looked exactly as it had beneath the sea. Its polished surface had not changed. The delicate silk cord still wrapped neatly around its lid. Not a single scratch marked its sides. It seemed untouched by time, yet everything around him had changed. The shoreline no longer felt familiar. The village where he had spent his childhood had become a place of strangers. The old fishermen whose laughter once echoed across the harbor were gone. The children who had raced along the beach had grown old, then quietly become memories themselves. Even the pine tree that had watched over the bay had disappeared. Only the sea remained. The waves continued arriving exactly as they always had, rolling gently onto the sand, then quietly returning once more. The ocean seemed almost unaware that generations had come and gone along its shores. Perhaps the sea measures time differently. Standing alone beside the water, Urashima looked once more toward the distant horizon. Somewhere beneath those endless waves, the Dragon Palace still existed. The coral gardens, the pearl lanterns, the gentle music drifting through quiet halls. Princess Ottoheim. Everything remained exactly where he had left it. Yet he could never be certain whether he would find it again. The little box suddenly felt heavier. Not because its weight had changed, but because memories often become heavier than stone. He remembered the princess's final words. Asterisk, whatever happens, asterisk, asterisk, never open the tamé-bargo. Asterisk, at the time the promise had seemed easy. He had expected to return home before evening. Perhaps share stories with friends. Perhaps wonder privately whether anyone would ever believe him. Instead, he stood in a world where no one remembered his face. The promise now carried a different meaning. He walked slowly along the beach. The afternoon sun had begun sinking toward the western sea. Golden light stretched across the waves. The tide whispered softly against smooth stones. Seabirds drifted effortlessly upon the breeze. Everything appeared peaceful, yet within his heart questions quietly gathered. Why had the princess forbidden him from opening the box? Was it protecting him, or protecting something else? Could it somehow return him to the Dragon Palace? Could it restore the years that had disappeared? Or could it simply reveal the truth he had not yet accepted? Curiosity is a quiet thing. Rarely does it arrive all at once. Instead, it grows slowly, like a single ripple spreading across still water. The longer Urashima remained alone, the stronger that curiosity became. He sat upon a weathered stone overlooking the sea. The box rested beside him. For a long while he made no movement toward it. He simply watched the waves. Perhaps he hoped the answer would arrive without needing to break his promise. The sea offered only silence. As the afternoon slowly became evening, the sky changed its colors. Soft blue gave way to gentle shades of gold. Gold slowly deepened into orange. Soon the first hints of crimson touched the distant clouds. The sea reflected every changing color perfectly. For countless generations, people have watched sunsets like this along Japan's shores. Perhaps some quietly remembered this very story. Perhaps others simply admired the beauty before them. Stories and landscapes often become inseparable. The longer a place is loved, the more memories it quietly gathers. Urashima picked up the little box once again. His fingers traced the smooth lacquered wood. The silk cord remained carefully tied. It would take only a moment to loosen it. Only one small movement. Nothing more. He closed his eyes. He remembered Adahine's smile, her kindness, the peaceful halls beneath the sea, the turtle carrying him through forests of coral, the gentle music drifting through the palace. He remembered his promise. Then he remembered the empty village, the strangers, the forgotten graves, the realization that everyone he had ever loved had long since become part of history. Sometimes the hardest promises to keep are the ones we no longer understand. Very slowly Urashima untied the cord. The knot loosened easily, almost as though it had been waiting. He lifted the lid. For one perfectly silent moment nothing happened. Then a thin white cloud rose gently from inside the box. Not smoke, not fire. More like morning mist drifting across a quiet lake. It floated upward without hurry, soft, almost beautiful. The white mist circled gently around him. It touched his hands, his face, his shoulders. The breeze carried it slowly toward the sea. The old stories tell us that as the mist left the box, time returned. Not the passing of a single afternoon, not the passing of a single season. Every year that it quietly slipped away while Urashima lived beneath the sea returned all at once. The years settled gently upon him. His dark hair slowly turned white. The strength in his hands faded. The smoothness of youth quietly gave way to the lines of great age. His back bent. His breathing became slower. Not suddenly, not painfully. Simply as though time itself had been patiently waiting. The transformation was neither punishment nor revenge. It was simply the completion of something long delayed. The years had always belonged to him. Now they had finally found their way home. The empty box slipped quietly from his hands. It landed softly upon the sand. The waves continued reaching toward the shore. The sunset remained beautiful. Nature itself did not change. Only the traveler watching it. Some versions of the old story end here. Others say that a white crane appeared above the sea. Still others tell of Urashima's spirit returning peacefully toward the Dragon Palace. Ancient folktales often change as they travel from village to village. Each generation remembers different details, adds gentle touches, leaves others behind. Yet almost every version preserves the same quiet feeling. Time is precious. Not because we can hold on to it, but because we cannot. The seasons continue whether we notice them or not. Cherry blossoms bloom, then gently fall. Summer arrives with warm evenings beside the sea. Autumn paints mountains in crimson and gold. Winter settles softly across quiet temples. Then spring returns once more. The world never stops moving. Perhaps that is not something to fear. Perhaps it is what makes every ordinary morning so beautiful. The old storytellers never asked listeners to become afraid of time. Instead, they gently reminded them to treasure the moments already resting within their hands. A shared meal, a peaceful walk through a cedar forest, the sound of rain upon a wooden roof, the laughter of family gathered together, a quiet sunrise above the sea. These simple moments soon become memories, just as they always have, just as they always will. The waves continued rolling gently toward the shore. The evening sky slowly welcomed its first stars. And somewhere far beneath those endless waters the dragon palace remained exactly as it had always been, patiently waiting, beyond the reach of ordinary time, like an old memory resting peacefully beneath the sea. The old stories never truly end. They simply grow quieter, like the final light of evening slowly fading beyond distant mountains or the last ripple spreading gently across a calm lake. The tale of Urashima Tarō came to its peaceful conclusion. The dragon palace disappeared once more beneath the sea. The waves continued their endless conversation with the shore, and somewhere beyond memory the Princess Adoheim quietly watched over the world below the ocean. Yet Japan's stories did not end there. Far from it. For countless generations, children continued gathering beside warm fires on quiet evenings. Grandparents continued telling stories after long days of work. Monks carefully copied ancient legends onto delicate scrolls. Travelers carried old tales from one village to another. Every generation remembered something, added something, forgot something else. That is the quiet nature of folklore. It changes yet somehow remains the same. If you were to walk through Japan today, you would still discover traces of these ancient stories, not because dragons fly above the mountains, not because foxes openly speak to travelers, but because the stories quietly live alongside ordinary life. Visit an old shrine early in the morning, long before crowds arrive, perhaps just after sunrise. You may hear nothing more than birds singing among cedar branches, the gentle ringing of a bell carried by the wind, the soft footsteps of someone offering a silent prayer. There is no great spectacle, no extraordinary miracle, only stillness. Yet many people who visit such places describe feeling something difficult to explain. Not fear, not excitement, simple peace. Perhaps that is what these old stories have always tried to protect. Not supernatural creatures, not impossible adventures, but moments of quiet attention, moments when we remember that the world is larger than our hurried thoughts. Walk through an ancient cedar forest. Some of the trees have stood there for hundreds, even thousands of years. They have watched empires rise. They have watched villages grow. They have watched children become grandparents and those grandparents become memories. Still the trees remain, standing patiently beneath changing skies. It becomes easier to understand why people once believed great forests possess their own calming, not because every tree performed miracles, but because such places naturally inspire respect. Some feelings need no explanation, only experience. The same is true beside rivers. Across Japan, clear mountain streams continue following paths carved countless centuries ago. Water slips quietly around smooth stones. Dragonflies drift above the surface. Small fish disappear beneath gentle currents. Nothing about the river asks to be admired. It simply continues flowing, patiently, exactly as it did when the first storytellers imagined Izanagi washing away the dust of Yomi. Perhaps that is why rivers appear so often within Japanese mythology. They quietly remind us that life continues moving forward, never rushing, never stopping, only flowing. Along the coast, fishing boats still leave before sunrise. Their silhouettes cross calm water while the eastern sky slowly brightens. The sea remains generous. The sea remains mysterious. Even today, no one has explored every corner of the deep ocean. Countless creatures remain unseen. Entire landscapes rest beneath the waves. It is easy to imagine why people once believed magnificent palaces might exist beneath the sea. Perhaps stories like the Dragon Palace remind us that mystery itself possesses beauty. Not every question requires an answer. Sometimes wonder is enough. Then there are the mountains. Japan is a country shaped by them. They rise quietly behind cities, stand watch over peaceful villages, disappear into clouds during rainy afternoons. For thousands of years, travelers crossed narrow mountain paths knowing daylight would eventually fade before reaching home. Mist gathered among cedar trees. Birdsong echoed through distant valleys. The world became wonderfully quiet. It was within places like these that stories of Tengukodama and wandering spirits found their home. Perhaps the mountains did not create those stories. Perhaps the stories simply gave voice to feelings already resting there. There is something about great mountains that naturally encourages humility. The old myths understood that. Even today, many mountain paths eventually lead to small shrines, simple wooden buildings standing peacefully among ancient trees. No grand palaces, no towering walls, just quiet places where people pause, offer gratitude, then continue walking. Sometimes that is enough. The seasons also continue telling their own stories. Spring arrives with cherry blossoms drifting through temple grounds. For only a short time the trees become clouds of pale pink. People gather beneath them, share food, laugh together, take photographs. Then almost before anyone is ready the blossoms fall, softly, without regret. The Japanese have long treasured this moment, not despite its briefness but because of it. Beauty becomes more precious when we know it cannot last forever. Perhaps that is why the story of Urashima Tarō has remained so beloved. It reminds us gently that time is always moving. Summer follows. The forests deepen into rich shades of green. Cicadas sing from sunrise until evening. Warm air settles across old villages. Children chase dragonflies through quiet fields. The sea sparkles beneath endless blue skies. Life feels wonderfully full. Then autumn arrives. Maple leaves slowly turn crimson. Golden ginkgo trees brighten city streets. Cool winds begin crossing the mountains once again. Temples become surrounded by brilliant colors. Travelers pause more often, simply to look, simply to appreciate. Then winter. Snow settles gently across rooftops. Steam rises from quiet hot springs. Temple bells sound especially clear through cold morning air. The world seems slower, calmer, as though nature itself has decided to rest. Soon enough spring quietly returns, just as it always has. The stories move with the seasons. The seasons move with the stories. Neither ever truly disappears. They simply continue, generation after generation. Perhaps that is why these ancient myths still matter today. Not because we expect to meet dragons upon mountain roads. Not because foxes truly transform beneath the moonlight. But because the stories encourage us to notice something easily forgotten. The sound of wind through cedar branches. The reflection of moonlight upon still water. The warmth of sunlight after many rainy days. The comfort of returning home. The kindness of helping someone in need. The quiet beauty of ordinary moments. Those things remain just as real now as they were 1,000 years ago. And perhaps that has always been the greatest gift these old stories offer. Not certainty, not answers. Simply a gentler way of looking at the world. As night slowly settles once more and the stars quietly appear above distant mountains, the old tales drift peacefully back into the forests, the rivers, the temples, and the endless sea. There they wait, patiently, for another quiet evening, for another curious traveler, for another listener willing to slow down close their eyes and remember that somewhere hidden among the mountains beneath the waves or deep within an ancient forest, the oldest stories of Japan are still quietly being told.